Hello, attendees, and welcome to our session. My name is Bob Reeker. I am a Lincoln Public Schools K-5 art educator in Lincoln, Nebraska, as well as the Nebraska Art Teacher Association president.
And I'm Lorinda Rice, the curriculum specialist for Lincoln Public Schools, and amazing opportunity for me to work with a lot of different art teachers in the district.
We are excited. Yeah, go ahead, Lorinda.
So today's information, if you're curious about it, you can use the QR code and find this information, or you can also go to our webpage, www.lps.org, and go into the search box and type in RSY4, where you can find this information and look through it even further.
Lorinda and I are really excited to share with you a plan that has been created for many, many years around this idea of the creative research process, creative process, as many of you are familiar, and you probably have your own iteration of what that looks like. But one of the first stages in our process is this idea of curiosities, and how do we help children ask questions and develop those curiosities around a theme. So sit back, enjoy as we explore curiosities through a thematic teaching learning approach.
So our goals today are to understand what curiosities mean to you, as well as what they mean to learners you work with each day. And then we're going to explore different ways to investigate curiosities with students in your classroom.
This, of course, as many of you are familiar with, is a Venn diagram that helps us, all learners, whether they're young or our age, to be able to explore topics. And so as you can see here, there's a variety of ideas on here. And part of those circles in the middle there really get to that first stage that we're talking about with curiosities, this idea of allowing people to investigate something that they're interested in, and then how do they develop an idea that is creative, unique to them as creators. Around the outside then, you see we have a theme-based approach that we have been doing now for the last several years that allow us to have a kind of a common connection to one another, but then allowing for that personal voice, that personal agency. We've examined this idea of making thinking visible. Culturally responsive teaching is a big part of this. And then, as is in many educational venues, how do we make sure that we are providing diversity and equity within what we teach?
So these are really important for us because we get to serve a lot of different students here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And as more and more people come and start to relocate in Nebraska, how are we asking our teachers to look at supporting more diverse artists from the canon and ways that we can help students tell their story for their own way?
And I love what you just said, Lorinda, because at the center of all of this is, of course, the learner. And so keeping the learner in mind as we develop and move forward through our units is always the critical piece. How are we making sure that they have a vested interest? How do we make sure that if they don't have background knowledge about something, we're scaffolding that for them, but then allowing them to enter and then create about something that's very personal to them as they explore? Yes.
So why this approach? It really allows all of our students to find a connection. I'll give you an example of when I taught at a Title I school here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was in the mode of using some of the canon artists, and Van Gogh was his bedroom picture. And I thought, why not do that? But what I really realized later on after going through the process, when students didn't enjoy it, when I was struggling with them, that many of my students didn't have a bedroom that they were in. They didn't have a connection to a place that was their own. And so for them, it was foreign. It didn't connect to them. So by using broader themes by Boyer and others, we really start to expand that notion of there's a space for all of us to find commonalities and celebrate the differences.
That last bullet, I think, is so critical, right? We have kids asking us all the time, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I in school? Why do I need to do this? Well, guess what? Thematic approach can help them connect the why of what they're doing and make sense of what they are learning as well. Great example. Look at this little image here. I just did this earlier in the year with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And we talked about how something like natural disaster can affect a community so badly that they have to immigrate. They have to leave their area and go elsewhere. So this young third grade student decided to go the route of a natural disaster and has depicted sculpturally tornado going through a community and devastating the community. Her twin sister in another classroom decided to go the friendship route, and how we can bring in immigrants into our community and be their friends. And so two very different approaches by two little girls that have a lot of the same experiences and having grown up together, but they both explored this immigration, something that made sense to them. Definitely this little girl is that bridger. She went beyond and really delved deeper, where her twin sister was more of that hugger to what the theme was about. And they both investigated it in different ways.
So one of the key things about thematic teaching here in Lincoln Public Schools is we try to connect it to something that students are learning in the classroom. And so these themes usually connect to a science theme, a social studies theme, or a language arts theme. And so what you have is students coming in with their own funds of knowledge, either a simplified fund or an expanded fund, as Bob just talked about, which is really amazing and fun to watch them expand that.
Some other reasons why you might want to approach this is it really does emphasize the process, but the product still is an important part of what we do. So it emphasizes this idea of how do we think through, how do we develop those creative thinking skills and problem solving skills, but it also is busy building that curiosity. It certainly engages kids because they have a vested interest in what the theme is, because we've said to them, you're going to personally explore this somehow through this entire process. And it begins with this idea of what are you curious about? What do you want to explore?
In some areas of the nation, we're starting to hear about guaranteed and viable curriculum. And so what our work here in Lincoln Public Schools is about is having teachers come in and build units to share with other teachers around these themes so that they can get a sense or an idea of the way or direction that they can go. And we give them at least 4 units that they can choose from. They may not get to all of those units, but they're there so that they can use them. And it shows as a district what we're looking for and what we want our students to do. So that can be shared with parents, with families, with community members, and with administrators.
Great example, Lorinda. Last year in the school, I was in a different school in downtown Lincoln. I had a little boy move in from a school out in East Lincoln, and he came into the art room and welcomed him, and then moved into what we were doing for the day. And his eyes lit up. He raised his hand and he said, "Mr. Reeker, we were talking about water in my old art room." And so immediately he felt welcomed, he felt connected, and he felt like he could contribute because he had been exploring that concept. And so that adds into this idea of why a guaranteed and viable curriculum is so important in our area.
So what constitutes a good theme? How universal is it? As I said earlier, Ernest Boyer, you can look him up. He's got a lot of, wrote a great essay about how the world was looking at during his time and what we needed to do to come together as a group of people. So he has a lot of different ways of looking at it, and they're really, really big and broad themes. The other thing that's really important about this is how do we find ways to connect our learners to this theme? What are the questions that we're going to ask? Who are the different artists that we can use? What are the different poetry or stories or videos that we could use that will help guide our students into that theme and then create that array of different connections that are there?
And by having a good theme, it gives us variety. Then we don't have 25 of the same thing that's being created, because they're all being created by the individual and what their belief system is, what their understanding is, what their connections that they're making. So you can see off here to the right, these are examples of our themes from this year. You'll notice they are very universal. They allow people to connect. They have a variety of results. And ultimately, we do have those essential and generative questions that help to broaden and then also deepen the understanding. Making kids think about these themes is a critical component of Curiosities.
So our creative process has really gone through some iterations as we learn more from different people. And so you can see on the left the creative process that we started with over 20 years ago, and then some work that we did with Kimberly Diadamo in understanding how to go deeper into that creative process to add that research component and put that onto the students so that they were the ones that were coming up with those ideas by finding different things to look at. We also looked at the work of Melissa Purdy and Ian Sands and how they were working through their framework to inspire students, to connect students, and to push them in their thinking.
And we do need to give credit to Davis Publications because Melissa and Ian work closely with them, and that's where a lot of their work it can be found. So as we look at those three different ideas, you'll see right away that the connective piece to this when we're thinking about curiosities is that question asking, the curiosities that we currently talk about, as well as that idea of inspiration. So you can see this concept we're talking about today, no matter what kind of process you're using, definitely has that component in it. It just might be a different name, but it often has some very similar ideas within it.
So what do you know? That's really where you start. Like, what do kids come into our rooms already having in their heads, that fund of knowledge that they bring with them as individuals and as collective groups? And so teachers are really thinking about this through mind mapping or thinking walls, charts of know, want to know, and what to learn, using journals, sketching, lists, Venn diagrams, and maybe also starting from a visual. What do we see here? What do we think about that? What do we wonder about that? Wonderful strategy that really engages students. And you'll see examples here of students thinking about the different concept and then the different ways that they think about it. You'll notice if you have time to look at this closely, all the different ways, as Bob and I have talked in many different presentations, that their connection to that theme can happen.
And a critical piece to this is also making sure you're looking for variety. That is the beauty of our district, is when there are nearly 100 art teachers, we're able to work off one another and to be able to come up with a variety of ideas. If every time we start a unit, children are coming in and they're doing only thinking walls with every single unit, the novelty of it goes away very quickly. So how do we make sure that we are mixing this up and trying different things to make sure that children realize I can get at curiosities beyond just one strategy, one way of doing it? And we've invested a lot of time in examining how we can do that.
The key thing here is that they're pushing their thinking, they're seeing how other people think about that topic and sharing those ideas verbally and visually.
An area that we've spent time on the last few years is this concept that comes from Project Zero about making thinking visible. It really helps children to be able to understand collaboratively all the different ways that we can put forth ideas, ask one another, and then develop those ideas further. And again, these can be done lots of different ways. We can't get into kids' brains and necessarily see what's going on unless they show us, and that can be done through all the ways that are listed there.
And in an elementary, it might start out with a teacher doing most of the work on a thinking wall, but as they go along, students really start to put those different ideas into their journal or into sketches, which then makes it their own. And that scaffolding is really important in visible thinking. And how do we support students in having conversations around the topic or theme? What are the questions that we're asking, and how do we help students share their different beliefs, behaviors, and ways of being as a way to promote a diverse group of students thinking in diverse ways?
Another concept that's been reinforced in our district, and I know in many across the nation, is this idea of how are we culturally responsive teaching. So this is a pedagogy that recognizes students' backgrounds, their cultural references, anything that they might bring to the classroom that reflects who and what they are. So you can see here some of the key concepts listed in the second bullet. You know, what is their previous learning that they bring to the classroom? There's that piece about making learning visible. Are we engaging our students in this learning process? It's a focus on student interest and strengths. What is it that they are most interested in? And what is it that they bring to the table that they feel really good about, that they can contribute to this collaborative nature? And then, as I'm just saying, it both focuses on an individual as well as that collective learning. We can learn from others, but we also bring lots of things to the table. And of course, all this work is based on the work by Zaretta Hammond.
So one of the things that we're really working on is visual essays and bringing in multiple diverse artists as inspiration, and really thinking about their historical masters, contemporary creators, BIPOC artists, different genders, different varied abilities. And so we want our students to see lots of different artists, and you may have see in this and in other work that we do, we share the work of art and a picture of the artist, so that not only are our students seeing what a work of art could have in it, but also who the artist was, who the creator was, and what their thinking is.
And Lorinda, I'm just going to interject here. As you can see, this quote from Melissa Purdy, who of course works for Davis. Her quote was, all students should see themselves in the art and the artists they see. I took the liberty of actually changing that. I'm sure Melissa will understand my thinking behind this as I share it, but I really do believe all students must see themselves in the art and artists that they see in class. It's critical that not only they see themselves, but then they're also exposed to people that do not look like them as well, have the same belief systems, as we try to broaden their perspectives and see that we all do things differently. I think it's a critical piece of what we do every single day.
It really is. So where do we get these diverse artists from? So one of the biggest places that we start to look at is Art 21. And Art 21 does a really great thing of creating a website that shows artists by themes or big ideas. They also give us examples of essential questions so that you can help frame your investigation. So we're really diving into that resource and going to lots of their presentations to learn more. And then we're also, as I said earlier, creating those visual essays, that multiple artists using multiple different sources of media so that they can see themselves or ways to create, not in just one mode and one way.
So some other things behind Art 21 also are this idea that it pushes beyond that media driven, and then we added in an art vocabulary curriculum that for many, many years, many art teachers and districts have focused on. It also asks students, learners, to think and talk more and potentially make less. So making that learning visible, and then emphasizing the process over the product. But I would assert that we do have to strike that balance. Even though we want to emphasize process, that product piece is still important. We know it's important to learners. We know it's important to their families. And we also know we have a lot of stakeholders out there that want to see the product. But as we've been talking, thinking, making visible, you can certainly show your stakeholders all the different ways that you're helping children to learn. So put that out in your hallways, stick that in your newsletters, put those on your website so they can see we're not just creating beautiful pieces of artwork, but there's tons of thought and process that's going into that.
That may be a switch for some of our art teachers around the nation, and definitely was for our teachers here, is instead of having 2 or 3 projects that they might do within a quarter or a semester, they may be just focusing on one work of art, but really delving into that process to help make it the child's work instead of the teacher's work.
And you can see here in the lower right-hand corner, this is just a brief example. We did a theme a couple of years ago about what makes a community. In fact, it was the fall when we returned after school had been canceled, the spring of 2020. And we really wanted to go into what makes a community a caring community. We thought that was so important. So you can see here so many different artists. Now, you do not see the faces of the artists on these images here because this was a review. But as we looked at each of these artists, we made sure that there was a photograph of each of these artists so the children could see themselves in the variety of people that we had chosen as inspiration.
And this unit was actually inspired by a group of San Francisco teachers at the creative school. And they did a really good job of in downtown, in the area that the school is, interviewing the different people in the community and having students create different things along with that. So finding artists or art teachers or educators who are doing something and then looking at their work and bringing it into your own school is just another way that we can continue to grow and learn from each other.
And Lorinda, you made me think of something when I was doing this unit, in the school in downtown Lincoln. Tons of public art that were within less than a mile of that school. And I made sure to highlight during this community theme all the different art that children can go see 24/7, 365 in their own community. And that was a huge eye opener for a lot of my students who drive past or walk past these artworks every single day. And they were recognizing them and they were coming back into the classroom. Mr. Reeker, I saw that mural or I saw that public art piece as we were moving throughout the community. Very powerful way to kind of even move this theme a little bit deeper and further for students.
Yes. So another resource that we use and is an incredible resource is anti-racist art teachers. The group of volunteers, they're art teachers who are putting together, compiling information for all of us as they work towards removing biases, stereotypes, and false narratives in art education is that group of teachers. And it's a beautiful site. We encourage you to go there. If you're looking for different artists and don't have a curriculum specialist that may be able to help you, they have a great resource. It's done by artists, their skills, their media, and then who they are. So a beautiful place to go and find information.
And here's another visual essay that we created. Again, just a snippet. We usually have anywhere between a dozen and 20 different artists and artworks that people can look at and utilize if they want to. And they're making some of those decisions, right, as the stakeholder and the creator of these units, because we provide templates. But as Lorinda pointed out earlier, we have teachers that are teaching in a variety of different situations with the number of days they see kids. So you can see here the variety that we have here. We try to use local artists. For example, Michael Forsberg is a famous nature photographer in Nebraska. But then we also make sure that we have diverse artists like Emmy Whitehorse. And we don't forget some of those canon artists as well. So Claude Monet was included. But then also, we don't have to just look at art. We can look at contemporary things that are going on in our world. We had the Flint, Michigan issue with the water that was toxic. And this came from Time magazine in 2015. And so we shared that. So it can be inspirations during this curiosity can come from so many different places as you explore. And if you go to this presentation, you'll be able to go and see another visual essay about this idea of positivity in the face of adversity.
So again, centered around the learner, what are the different ways that we're helping our students be curious, helping them learn how to make investigations, to go deeper, to find out more information that they're curious about? And that's really the basis of creativity. That's where we get our students to learn how to be an artist, learn how to be a learner, and learn how to be an explorer of their world. Those themes are really important, making them broad and using diverse artists so that we have a collection of different people and creators.
We appreciate you joining us today for this session. I'm hoping you take away something, whether it reinforces something you already know or you heard lots of new things. Take whatever it is and bite off a little piece and then move it forward this year or even starting next year. You can't do it all at one time, but take a little piece and see where you can investigate and move that forward.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. We hope that we inspired you to think a little bit more about curiosities in the art room and the ways that you can help your students find their voice to tell their story.
If you would like to visit with us with celebrations, questions, just want to chat about this idea, feel free to email us. My email is bobreeker@gmail.com.
And my email is lrice@lps.org. We thank you for your time and we hope you enjoyed this presentation.